There are different groups of people that businesses interact with all the time or are affected by our business. It's important to understand them. It's important to identify them, and it's important to engage with them. But the engagement part, right? We don't have unlimited time and we don't have unlimited resources, so we can't engage with everybody at the same level. So that's where understanding who they are or identifying who they are and their importance really makes a difference. This group of people, we call them stakeholders. A stakeholder is a person with an interest or concern in something that our business does. I like to think of it personally as anyone involved with or affected by our organization is a stakeholder. There are two types of stakeholders mainly to consider. The first type are internal stakeholders, and the second type are external stakeholders. Internal stakeholders are anyone who is involved in the business. So here we're thinking about business owner, managers, supervisors, employees. External stakeholders are people who are affected by our business, but not directly involved in our business. So governments, suppliers, customers, community, as well as, I suppose, the people's family who work in our business, quite essentially. So when we consider the importance of stakeholders, there's two really basic parameters that we can use. The first one is power, how much power that stakeholder has. The second one is interest, so how interested the stakeholder is in our activities. From a power perspective, so I'm just going to give you one example, right? So imagine a box. This box is split into four categories: power being one axis, interest being the other axis. People that are really powerful but have very low interest in what they're doing, these could be quite essentially the directors of the business. The directors of the business are very powerful. They can make decisions. They can change a lot of different things, but they might not be interested in the day-to-day activities of what it is that we're doing. Like, let's say, for example, you work in the marketing department. Now, an IT director or director of ICT, they have a lot of power, but they don't really care what we do on a day-to-day basis. That's not really in their field as such. It's not up to them. They don't really care. Or say director of HR, or let's say, for example, the owner of the business, right? The owner of the business is thinking about the long-term strategic stuff. So they're not super interested in what we do day to day. So high power, but low interest. The opposite of this, right, would be low power, but high interest. So low power, high interest. If we're looking at this particular group of people, right? So for example, a little bit controversial, but customers. Customers have a very high interest in what we do as a business because it impacts on the products that they're getting, products being goods and services, and a very high level of interest. But customers, as in an individual customer, doesn't have a very high amount of power to influence what we do as an organization on a day-to-day basis. Of course, collectively, a group of customers or a large group of customers, they can make a big difference, but the individual customer, not so much. So high power, low interest, high interest, low power. Let's look at low power, low interest. Low power, low interest within the organization, looking at internal stakeholders. This would be all the other people that we work with who are in different departments to ourselves. Now, we work in the same company, but we work on completely different projects. They're the same level as us, so their power is the same as us. So we can basically say low power. But because they're working on their own projects, they're not super interested in what, let's say, I do or what we do in our department. So as a result of which, low power and low interest. The last group of people, high power, high interest, right? So high power, high interest. So the direct opposite to this. From an internal stakeholder perspective, we would say our direct boss, right? So let's say our supervisor, our manager, the people that we have to report to directly, they're super interested in what we are doing. And they have a lot of power to influence what we are doing. So they fall in this particular category. From an external stakeholder or an internal stakeholder perspective, we would look at all the stakeholders we identify and start putting them into these different categories. By understanding what category they fall in, it should help us, the organization, to divide up our time and divide up our resources to provide them with what they need the most of, or how to meet their needs the best. For example, our high power, high interest, they need to be informed. They need to be kept in the loop. They need to be taken care of really well, because not only do they have the power to make a difference, they're also interested in what we're working on. Whereas people who have low power and low interest, if we just send them a very, very, very brief summary of, hey, this is what we're doing in the organization, that should be more than enough. From there, if they want to ask more questions, they can. If they don't want to, they don't have to. In terms of high interest but low power, once again, these people, we can keep them informed, but at a very, very, very basic level. They're super interested in us, so we want to give them information going, this is what we're working on. This is what's currently happening. These are the future projects, and so on and so forth. High power, low interest. Because they're not super interested in what we're doing, but they are very powerful, we want to make sure that they have access to information when they need it. And whatever information we do send them, it is still more or less from a summary perspective so that they can read bits and pieces and get an overall idea. However, if they wanted more information, everything can be made available to them. Now, doing all these reporting type activities, whether it's reporting as in promoting particular stuff, creating blogs and talking about particular stuff, having meetings face-to-face or video conferences and so on and so forth, all these different activities, they take time. And as an organization, as a business, or even as individuals, our time is limited, as is the money side of things as well. So we really need to understand our stakeholders, to do a stakeholder analysis, figure out the power and the interest that they have, and then react accordingly.